did at the University of Adelaide with Professor Peng, and others. We had a very nice introduction today with a detailed description of what climate change triggers are and what are going to be the implications for the natural resources and for the infrastructure. And we also heard a lot about the level of uncertainty that is there with the climate science. And while the climate scientists are trying to decrease this level of uncertainty and trying to make their projections better, social scientists have to think about how to understand which population groups are going to be the most affected by climate change. And the social vulnerability usually looks at the pre-existing vulnerabilities of population, and the main assumption and concern is that the existing socioeconomic marginalization in the society is going to affect the disproportional impact of climate change on population groups. However, there's very little research on the impact of climate change on disadvantaged groups and on the equity dimensions. So the aim of our project is to fill in this gap in our understanding. And the way to do it, we need to develop a set of indicators to measure vulnerability at the household and individual level, and then to actually measure this vulnerability and come up with policy strategies to make disadvantaged households more resilient to climate change impact. So the way we did it, we did a thorough literature review and understood that the best way to measure vulnerability, social vulnerability to climate change, to actually incorporate the concept of social exclusion into climate change. And we applied it on the local governmental area level using the Census 2011 data. And we also collected primary data from 3 local governmental areas in South Australia. We did the Sevoyan Port Pirie, Port Adelaide, Enfield, and Barrow regions. We did qualitative interviews and we did stakeholder interviews in these 3 areas. And we applied different methods of analysis to come up with this policy and strategy development. So I'm going just to summarize the findings, and if you need more detail, you'll read the report that is going to be on the NCCARF website and on our website in about 2 weeks. So the main finding of our study was that the level of social exclusion actually explains the increased perception of vulnerability and increased perception of adaptation, failure, or difficulty among most of the disadvantaged groups. However, what is interesting is that multiple disadvantages exacerbate the impact of climate change beyond what the social exclusion level can explain. So, for the policy perspective, it is important to embed the climate change into existing social inclusion agenda. The next important finding from our study was that the high level of economic exclusion risk is not compensated for by the social participation, which is so important to deal with not only the extreme weather events, but also the gradual negative impact of climate change. So it is important to recognize this social support and social participation and to try to increase the level of social participation among disadvantaged groups. Also, we found that a lot of the disadvantaged households were actually very motivated, and they were actually taking steps to have more sustainable environment in their households and to be more resilient. However, they were facing a number of institutional barriers and information barriers to be more effective in what they were doing. So it is important from our point of view to shift our attention to the local communities, build up stronger communities for the more effective response to climate change effects. And it was very nice to see that the local governmental area thinks that local communities are very important too. We also found that we need a special focus on Aboriginal population. Not only they are the most disadvantaged among the disadvantaged groups, they lack access not only to economic resources, information, and social support systems, they also have the highest incidence of multiple disadvantage and health issues among them. But what was more important, they are the least accessible from the study perspective. It's very hard to study Aboriginal population with the conventional methods of population studies. So we need to have a special and a specialized approach to Aboriginal population. So because most of the disadvantaged groups are having more of a, they're ready to be resilient, but they don't have the means to do that. But I think we think with our research group that it's important to build up wider resilience among these groups. It is also important to address the utility cost issues among them. We heard about the housing project today and how it can help some groups, but I was questioning whether this solution is better for those who can afford to build more effective houses rather than the lower socioeconomic group who's living in the public housing or in renting apartments in multi-level buildings. So maybe the challenges faced by the disadvantaged groups need to be discussed at the policy level rather than with the housing solutions. And we need to create a better communication with the disadvantaged groups. The one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work. It shows that the population groups are very confused with the messages about climate change that are coming to them, and they don't find it relevant to them, what was more important. We need to have this segmented approach to the information dissemination to these groups. And it is, of course, very important to engage and create a better conversation between the local communities and local NGOs and the work that is being done at the federal, state, and local government level.